The ballroom gleamed like someone had polished the walls all the way down to the baseboards. Crystal chandeliers spilled light onto round tables, trapping the wine in our glasses like little storms under glass. Somewhere beyond the doors, slot machines kept up the city's sleepless heartbeat. I sat with the family row, back straight, hands on my lap, my fingernail worrying the edge of a keychain patch from my squadron, the threads gone silver with age. The fabric's frayed lip felt like an old scar. I still carry it the way a soldier carries a pocket-sized piece of home. My father-in-law stood first. Navy suit, wine-colored tie, a smile that only lifted one corner of his mouth. Applause swelled when he raised his glass. I watched the rim where the light cut it into a knife-cold line. He finished congratulating himself, then let his voice slip like a draft under a door. "And now," he said, "I want to thank the family for tolerating certain choices, not always worthy of our name." Polite chuckles bubbled up as if it were seasoning. I set the keychain square in my palm and drew a slow breath through my nose. He turned toward me, the smile gone. "Some people think a uniform is glory," he said, tapping his fingernail on the glass, tack, tack. "At this table, glory is knowing where you belong." The tap slowed. I don't need disciplined trash sitting at mine. A few forks froze midair. Somebody coughed. I heard the air conditioner purr above us like a quick bird, smelled perfect steak and expensive perfume blooming off a wrist at the next table. My husband looked down, as if something crucial and invisible had appeared in the tablecloth. My mother-in-law touched her husband's sleeve, soft, ineffective. In my head, the Nevada flight line unrolled. White stripes, warning placards, jet wash skimming the skull, desert wind whistling between hangars like a lighter flicked in a pocket. I didn't feel any need to answer. I've learned to hold my silence when noise tries to swallow you, like standing beside a startup, listening with your eyes, with your palm on aluminum. I tilted a glass of water. It was cold, and it was honest. An ant on his side tried to thaw the room with talk of football. Someone asked about deployments, but the question dropped into the whispering and vanished. I smiled the way manners require. These silences have a smell. High-gloss wood, money, arrogance rolled in sugar. I've tasted it enough to know you don't have to swallow. He kept going, like the stage belonged to him and sound was under license. He bragged about acquisitions, about casinos that survived the dip, about suites staring right onto the neon strip. He name-checked the local paper, the mayor, the charities he supported each election season. Laughter blinked back on around the table. I touched the patch, felt the stiff thread rasp my finger. I wasn't angry. Anger wastes fuel. I was taking notes. Every soldier keeps an invisible notebook. My husband leaned in. "Don't take it to heart. He went too far." I turned and looked straight into his pupils where the chandelier fizzed like beer foam. "You know who I am," I whispered. He nodded, but the nod dropped like a quarter into a slot that never pays. My mother-in-law's smile thinned. She waved for new plates, asked for warm bread. Those small gestures were spackle for a famous wall with a spreading crack. The birthday song queued up. Candles on the tiered cake flickered like runway beacons. People sang, clapped, lifted their phones. I stood when everyone stood, looked like I belonged. But inside, a straight line was being drawn from here to elsewhere, like a training route across a map. Depart, refuel, objective, return. I gathered my bag, a plain canvas thing among the glittering clutches, and told my husband I needed air. He started to follow, glanced at his father, and didn't. The carpeted hallway swallowed our footsteps. Black and white photos of old Vegas lined the wall, a city of cheap magic and men who never folded early. I passed the bar. The shaker clacked ice against metal, the sound a cousin to airframe shiver right before liftoff. I caught my reflection, hair pinned back, light makeup, shoulders square. The face of someone who knows some fights don't need fireworks. At the elevator, a pack of men spilled out, cigars and cologne and hot laughter. They split to let me through, like I was moving faster than they could register. The doors closed, mirroring me twice, then once, then only me. No one stepped in. I tapped the patch again and let it fill my fist until the edge printed my skin. Red numbers ticked floor by floor, unhurried, steady, certain. I thought of concrete, of the afternoons I counted gusts to know where to cut my approach, of the crew beside me on the flight line, of late shifts, warming my hands on paper cups of coffee. I thought of roofs that didn't exist yet, for veterans sleeping 3 blocks from here in rooms meant for a week, not a life, and how keeping my word to them mattered more than saving any face in that room. Some insults are evidence all by themselves. They don't need my commentary. My floor chimed. This hallway was quieter, the carpet thinner, the bulbs warmer, truer versions of the same building. The key clicked, dry, clean. Inside, the AC blew cool into the silence. I put my bag down and my keychain on the desk, the gray patch square on the wood. The borrowed heels came off. My feet met the ground like they were remembering how. I pulled out a chair and sat the way I sit at a briefing. From here on out, everything would follow the plan, not because I wanted to feel righteous, but because I owe people who believed me. I cracked the window a finger's width. Desert air hissed the curtain. Somewhere below, Vegas kept breathing, lights holding, flaring. Holding. I didn't pray for anyone to change. I set a time in my head, easy to remember, simple as a command. Morning in the hotel room felt like manufactured cold. No base ever had this kind of air. I cracked the curtain and let the desert's gold dust my sleeve like chalk. On the table sat my keychain, the squadron patch rubbed thin. On the flight line, the wind is never polite. It throws sand into your eyes, your teeth, every seam you didn't know you had. I learned to read wind like faces. When it howls through sheet metal, rotors are close. When it hits you head on, you take one step back so it doesn't knock you off your feet. An instructor tapped my shoulder. Trust what you can measure. Let the wind say the rest. I keep that line like a pocket knife. On duty days, we walked the white stripes, checking every fastener, every cable. No one patted your back, things just had to run. One night we dragged a pickup out of a sand pit by the fence. The driver was a veteran, slurred words, cheap beer heavy in the cab. When the cable went tight and the tires kicked up poor man's fireworks, his eyes flickered like he was afraid he'd disappear. When we freed him, he held my hand a beat too long. No full thank you, just the small nod soldiers trade at a roadside. That night I understood. Some things can't be allowed to slip from your grip, like honor, like a roof. Another time, a tool chest slid off a stand and slammed Diaz's shin. He said he was fine, soldier talk, but his gait told the truth. I called medics and scrubbed the test. People grumbled about schedule. I soaked up the looks. When the X-ray showed the hairline fracture, everyone went quiet. The CO handed me another squadron patch, dark gray field, silver lightning, and said, "Nobody tells stories about the person who hits pause at the right second, but they are why we keep going." I looped both patches on one ring so the tiny metal kiss would follow every step. Between duty rhythms, there were late afternoons that smelled like a gentler America, backyard America. BBQ on the grass behind the barracks, charcoal popping, ketchup on your fingers. Kids sprinting through the hose spray, a buddy picking a few country songs. No one asked how much you made, just which shift you were on and if you needed a swap. If there's a fair place on earth, it's a folding plastic table where brisket gets split even and root beer sweats in the heat. Then there were dinners with his family. Thick cloth, heavy chairs, wine glasses that glowed like museum pieces. They asked about deployments in the tone people use for dangerous hobbies. I answered tight. No bragging, no asking permission to speak their language. One night they told a deal story like war. I told about a morning lifting a bird's nest off a sensor and setting it on the eave, watching the mother come back unafraid. They smiled politely, eyes sliding past as if double-checking a receipt. I stayed quiet because I once believed people can learn, the way a recruit learns to find their place in the line. I also stayed quiet for a plan that needed silence to grow, a housing fund for veterans right here in this city of lights. I met an old priest who coordinated a support group and asked what it would take, land and a bridge loan, to turn weekly rentals into lawful apartments. He looked at me like a map hot off the press. He said he needed time and a promise in writing, not ribbon-cut photos. I promised clear paperwork and a signature. When the project budged forward, I chose anonymity. Not because I love secrets, because I wanted doors to open for a clean file, not a last name. I learned contract language like radio procedure, every word in its slot, nothing extra. In the annex, I wired in the clauses last night had scraped raw. Respect veteran labor, no slurs at service identity, no using the fund as seasonal window dressing. In return, the project got the bridge money, fast-track permits, and a duty to report clean. I finished my coffee, opened the laptop, and ran the checklists again. Sweat along my spine dried fast like it does on concrete in wind. I looked at the two nested patches. They were wings folded tight on a metal bird waiting for a go. Last night, in a room too bright with a sentence heavy as wet rubber, I picked my battlefield. Not that table. These contracts, this fund, the keys that will land in hands that finally sleep. I don't need someone to stand up for me in a room that only laughs. I shut the lid, pocketed the keychain. Out there, Vegas breathed in light. In me, the bass breathed in jet. Between those pulses, I stood straight. I'm not the type who tries to win with louder words. I'm the type who trusts procedure and things you can measure. And it's time for what's measurable to speak for me. The hotel room was as quiet as a hangar with the doors pulled shut, only a red maintenance light blinking somewhere in memory. I pulled out a chair and set the laptop down like laying a mission map. The squadron patch on my keychain lay by my right hand. The raised stitches felt like a low ridgeline under my fingertip. I signed into the document vault and opened folders one by one. Fund, annexes, bridge loan agreement, ethics conditions. The file names were cold, but behind them were faces. People waiting for apartment keys and the first crisp sheet of a safe night's sleep. When the hotel conglomerate applied for a land incentive on its new complex, they had to prove social impact. I don't believe in ribbon scissors. I believe in clauses that growl when they're stepped on. So the bridge financing I stood behind, wrapped in a separate LLC, came with an annex. Protect the dignity and opportunities of veteran workers, no derogation of military service identity, transparent reporting of hiring and training. Dry as sand, but I knew it was water. My signature doesn't sit on the surface. The fund's council saw it, and a handful of bank people who had to, so the system would run. Everyone else got the shade, not the name. Last night, his sentence landed on the safety pin I'd set. Some men are used to turning the volume up to drown out everything else. I'm trained to listen for the low frequencies, where a vibration tells you which bolt is working loose. I opened Annex Ethics Trigger, PDF, where a line stands large enough to read without glasses. Public derogation of service members or veteran workforce activates suspension and review. I added a note, corroborating audio from a local reporter on site with an attestation. I didn't need a shouted comeback. I needed a lever. In squadron radio, we live on short hooks, push, abort, RTB. I named my operation Angel 10. Angel is how we call altitude. It also reminds me to keep my head cold. 10 is a clean number and a time hack. I opened a new document and traced the route, depart from this room, refuel on patience, Rendezvous with verified inboxes, pull the pin and let the mechanism engage itself. Message 1 was for the bank and the financing partners. The people who don't need speeches, only the right rails. I attached the annex, quoted the clause, stamped last night's time of incident, and closed with, per section Roman 20, we request a temporary suspension of disbursements and an ethics risk review. The remaining schedule stays in place until review closeout. I read it 3 times to make sure I hadn't wasted a single adjective. Money doesn't want flowers. It wants track. Message 2 went to the Veterans Housing Council, the people with both heart and discipline. I wrote like I write to teammates. We don't build to hang plaques. We build so those who stood guard have a place to hang their hats. Per the annex, voting authority temporarily shifts to the ethics group upon public violation. I recommend activating that mechanism. Attached, 12-month veteran hiring and training report. I added a short paragraph about classes queued for shop space and the list of vetted veteran applicants. Paper doesn't smell, but I could smell fresh lumber when I pictured the kitchens where they'd cook their first easy supper. Message 3 was for him. I didn't need to curse. I needed a mirror. I opened a blank email. The subject line sat like a runway waiting for green. I typed, a courtesy note. In the body, I put one sentence a grizzled sergeant once told me. Not everyone knows how to speak about honor, but everyone knows when it's been dragged through the dirt. Then one more line. Annex ethics trigger attached. No threats, no exclamation points. No one hears the airplane until the air itself changes. I rechecked the certs, ensured the LLC's digital signature was still valid and the fund's token hadn't expired. I rang the fund manager, a woman whose slow, sharp cadence comes from years as a personnel officer back east. We talked procedure, not men. When I referenced the annex, she said, "Good. Rules exist to be used." Light words, but they sounded like a hatch sealing at the right pressure. I paged into the comms folder and pulled the press lines in case they were needed. A tight statement that the fund won't discuss individuals. We'll speak to standards and schedule. We'll stand by veteran workers. No names, no arrows. My shield is process. I remembered the old priest with the rainbow of tape on his keyring. It's not for sorting, he'd said. It's to remind me who each door opens for. In the email toolbar, I saw 3 addresses in a neat flight of dots. Bank, counsel him. 3 doors, 3 strings. Outside, Vegas changed color slowly, like a photo finding its exposure. I planted my feet, inhaled, exhaled, and emptied my head of faces. Just circuits, one system at a time. I don't need to beat anybody. I need to keep a promise to the man at the chain-link fence who said, "You told us we'll have homes." Last night, when he threw words like chips, he didn't see the people behind the clauses. I did, and I signed with them before I signed with anyone else. I named the last file Angel 10 Sequence OK, TXD. It's just a list, but every line is a lever matched to its inertia. I hovered over send for each inbox and held. It's a ritual like a pilot resting a hand on the throttle before the push. You respect the stillness before motion. You give the world a beat to balance itself, and if it won't, you do it for it. Last night, hearing ice rattle in a bar shaker, I thought about mixtures that make sense only after they are shaken. This morning, there's nothing to mix into these words. Facts, signatures, the annex, and a time hack. I closed the laptop to let the battery breathe and leaned back. No perfume in the room, just HVAC and wood. Good. Clean. When I open the screen again, I won't add a single flourish. The plan has a shape. 3 messages are staged, and the time is marked, cold and neat, like the click of a switch. Tomorrow at 10:00. The hotel's borrowed apartment kitchen had nothing but a ticking coffee maker and a steel-cold sink. I poured water, set a paper filter, and watched the brown line pull the morning forward like a calm rope. On the table, my laptop was already open, windows arranged like panels on a wing. 3 emails waited, cursor poised. I palmed my keychain. The squadron patch touched my finger like a nod from someone standing in the shade. I cracked the window so a seam of desert air could slip in. The air was so dry a spoken word might shatter into dust. Sip of coffee. One more pass through the checklist. Annex attached, digital signature valid, distribution list verified, press line prepped. I called the fund manager. She picked up on the second ring, voice straight as a ruler. All set. Upon trigger, we open review, pinch the money valve, and transfer voting per the annex. I thanked her. No mention of last night. Between people who understand procedure, silence is enough. A knock, 2 light taps, 1 long. The knock of someone who's lived a lifetime in rooms where everything is done for them. I set the cup down and opened the door. My husband, shirt wrinkled, eyes red from too little sleep or too much thinking. Behind him, my mother-in-law, composed dress, faint perfume, a face wrapped in a silk calm. "We came to talk," she began, like a master of ceremonies taking a stage no one offered. She went straight to the kitchen, pulled out a chair, smiling on cue. "About last night, your father." She paused, as if the word sorry were a piece of jewelry gone missing. "He went too far, our family." Her gaze searched the kitchen for a nearby symbol of power. There was only wood and a gleaming faucet. "We can handle this in-house," my husband said, fingers laced. "If you just, I don't know, give him a chance to take it back, things will go smooth." The word smooth rolled out like a pebble across thick carpet. It didn't travel far. I sat straight. I don't need him to apologize in public. I need him to respect the person he dragged by name. I pointed to the screen, the annex already open. "These are the ethics conditions attached to the bridge loan. Not a weapon, a guardrail, so nobody goes over the edge." She squinted at the small type. "Dear, outsiders don't understand how an empire operates. These annexes can complicate things. Do you know how many workers rely on disbursement schedules? A move like this," bracelets clicked, a tiny chime, "creates misunderstandings." "There's no misunderstanding," I said. "Only choices." I turned to my husband. "Last night you knew he was wrong, you chose silence." He stared down, a pen got one unconscious tap of his finger and went still. "Today I'm choosing not to be silent." "I'm afraid it'll blow up," he whispered. "You know my father." I nodded. "I've stood next to engines that blow louder. My job isn't to kill the engine. My job is to keep people from getting sucked into the blades." My mother-in-law sighed, her eyes brushing the keychain. "Don't take me wrong, I respect the military. I donate plenty to veteran charities." She pressed the word donate like a byline. "But every house has house rules. If you do this, you put yourself against the family." "Respect isn't a number on a plaque," I said. "Respect is how you speak, hire, train, and keep your word." I topped off my husband's cup. He didn't drink. My phone buzzed. Email from the fund, ready to receive. Upon trigger, process will run. No exclamation points, none needed. "You could wait," she offered, voice soft with an edge. "Give him a day to consider, to adjust his words. You know his temper." I set the cup down. "This isn't about a mood, it's about standards. If our house can't live with them, our house shouldn't take public incentives. I say this as the person who signed and will answer for that signature." My husband looked up, eyes wet. "If I asked you just delay for my mother, for me." I laid my hand on his for one warm heartbeat. "I love you," I said, clean and direct. "But I need a partner who stands upright when others bow. I won't force you to pick me over your family. I'm telling you I won't pick silence." A stillness fell, like every dust mote hanging midair. She tightened her grip on her handbag, dabbed her lip with a white tissue, and gave me a tiny nod, as if recognizing a language she rarely speaks. "Please consider," she said, rising. A hand to her son's shoulder delivered an unspoken order. He followed her to the door. Before it shut, he turned back. "I'm sorry about last night." I nodded. Sorry is a starting point, sometimes that's all. The door drew a straight line. Back to AC and cooling coffee. I set 10 fingertips along the desk edge like touching down on concrete. In the window glass, the Vegas Strip slept through daylight. My pulse held even. In interference, you carry an even beat. I drifted the cursor across each email, one last read, the lines stacked like vehicles at a base gate. Annex, timestamp, digital signature, each thing seated in its proper chair. I slid the keychain to the table's lip and faced the patch toward the screen, my private superstition. Straight spine, full breath. My eyes found the tiny number in the corner, the mark set last night, tidy, not for show but for memory. I hit send at 10:00. The notification was a pebble dropping into water. A ripple moved outward without audience. I waited one more beat, the way a pilot keeps a hand on the throttle after wheels up. On screen, 3 sent. In the inbox, 3 received would arrive along the tracks of electrons and policy. Outside, the light shifted tone, as if someone eased the neon down a notch. I exhaled, not tired, just aligned. Another buzz. Not a call, just the read receipt from the fund. Trigger received, executing. I set the phone down. What needed saying now lived in documents. What needed hearing would arrive as consequences. I washed the cup and left it upside down on the towel. Water made a white ring in the porcelain. I pocketed the keychain. The apartment felt like a hangar that had just watched a frame roll into the sky. I stood, squared my shirt, opened the door. Not to start a fight, just to step into the work of silence. The knock wasn't polite this time. It shoved, like an elbow to the ribs to clear a lane. I set my keychain on the table squadron patch facing the handle and opened the door. My father-in-law filled the frame, tie skewed like he'd just argued in another room. Behind him stood a young man in thin glasses with a black case, the kind you hire to pronounce clauses without a tremor. "We're talking," he said, no hello. He strode in, eyes sweeping the place like inventory. The legal aide stayed at the carpet's edge and pulled out an iPad. I shut the door, came around the table, and took my seat. The room smelled like paper and cold steel, the scent of things that don't move just because someone yells. "What did you send?" His voice thickened. "Bank called me, the fund called me. Tabloids texted, you trying to burn the house down." I spun the laptop toward him, the screen came up like runway lights. "I'm not burning anything," I said. "Steady." I turned on the sprinklers your company installed when it took the bridge loan. I clicked open the folder bridge transfers. Lines populated, dates, times, amounts, recipients, project codes. I zoomed the ethics annex and circled with the cursor. The aide leaned to dodge the glare. His eyes moved fast. "These are the conditions," I said. "Public derogation of service members or veteran workers triggers suspension and review. I don't need you to agree. I need the system to work." He flicked his hand like shooing a stubborn fly. I made a toast. People laughed. So what? You think a few touchy words stop money? I opened evidence public incident, zip, and pulled up a photo of the local reporters at a station and audio note. A sound file sat there, date stamped, clinical. "We aren't talking feelings," I said. "We're talking facts. This is evidence. This is the timestamp. This is the annex your attorneys accepted to get the bridge." I flipped to the email chain between the lending LLC and his legal department, the approved column bright as day. His aide leaned a hair closer, like someone hearing their name on roll call. He changed tactics. "You think your money is big enough to stall this machine? I can swap the stream with 2 phone calls." He palmed his phone like a trigger. I zoomed counterparty conditions, or the cross binders between bank and fund. "You can change cars," I said. "You can't change lanes. Everyone on this lane hits the ethics checkpoint. That's how you manage risk." No emphasis. Let the language work. The aide spoke for the first time, voice like printer paper. Sir, Section 3, subsection C, we did accept a stop mechanism for public derogation of service members or veteran workforce. The phrasing is broad. He pushed his frames up. And the reporter's email satisfies public. The older man shot him a look like he'd found a loose bolt on his stairs. You're paid to find exits, not read me signs. I am finding an exit, the aide answered, still paper flat. The valid exit is not walking against the arrow. I opened Workforce Report, PDF, veteran headcount, retention, training hours, some numbers pretty, some not at all. I don't want the project dead, I said. I want it clean. You fix it, money resumes fast and better because transparency sells, or you can keep pushing slow, costly, dirty. I slid the cursor to remedial plan. This is the path, mechanical, clear. He braced both palms on the table and leaned into me. Cologne and anger mixed with AC chill. What are you in this? I met his eyes. The one who signed, the one responsible if the signature's misused. He laughed. Signed without your name, cute. I shrugged. Some people cut ribbons for cameras, some people stack material and raise roofs. I picked the second group. He chopped a hand toward the aide. Sue, a beat of hesitation. Sue the fund, sue the clause we signed, sue an incident with audio. I came in even, you can sue. A judge will ask why you agreed to a brake on a car you planned to floor, and why you stomped the gas while the brake was engaged. A vein showed at his temple, a cable pulled too tight. I flipped to the last tab, comms press SDMT, TXD. The fund statement, I said. A short note about standards and schedule. No calling your name, no needing your face. Let the story live at the system level or make it loud. I don't make a living on loud. He looked around as if the room had suddenly gone too small for his pride. You think you've won? He asked low. We don't use that word, I said. In my branch we say stabilize the system, keep people safe, return the equipment. I tapped the last line of the annex, reinstate upon cure. Make it right and money flips back on. I'm not against profit, I'm against paying with dignity. My phone buzzed, a banner slid up. Bank, freeze placed, review committee seated. Below it, Veterans Housing Council, vote transferred per annex. I didn't read them out loud. I just let the screen face him still on the annex. He understood and stepped back half a pace. You sent me a note too, he growled. A fortune cookie. I opened my outbox and clicked a courtesy note. 2 lines, people don't always know how to talk about honor. They all know when it's been dragged, annex attached. He gave a joyless smirk. You want me on my knees? No, I said. I want you on your feet. The aide cleared his throat, the sound of a safe idea asking permission. Sir, best path is a general apology, implement the remedial plan, raise veteran training targets. Bridge resumes in weeks, media cycles out. He looked to me. May we receive the detailed plan from the fund? I nodded. It's in the remedial plan packet, line by line, your boss can exceed minimums. I added precise. That's the only advantageous choice. My father-in-law leaned back. The chair clicked. He watched me a long time, like hunting a crack in poured concrete. I didn't grant him that pleasure. I set my hand on the table, the patch lay by my sleeve, its silver threads catching light. You know, I said evenly, if you'd said a different sentence last night, we wouldn't be here. He frowned. What sentence? I held his gaze. I don't understand all of it, but I respect it. He turned away as if the light had gotten harsh. His phone buzzed hard. He glanced down, jaw set, then a second phone in his vest started vibrating. The aide skimmed his iPad and murmured, Bank compliance media request, city liaison. Little rivets around a fuselage, quiet but keeping everything together. I stood. I'll send your aide the remedial schedule, I said. The door's open, but the first one through needs to speak respect. I turned back to him. When you're ready, the system will listen. He stared at me, then caught the table's edge like borrowing balance. What about my son? He asked, abrupt. I kept my eyes level. He can choose where to stand, same as the rest of us. At the threshold, the aide paused to give me the smallest nod, a gesture that almost didn't exist. The door closed, leaving paper and steel behind. I sat, reopened remedial plan, and added one clean line. The patch lay quiet on the wood. I smoothed it once, my version of a salute. Outside, the city changed colors, the AC didn't. I don't need applause, I need the system to keep working. My phone lit again, message delivered. Dry as the click of a safety, I darkened the screen. In the silence, I heard the most familiar sound in a soldier's life. A mission shifting from approach to hold. And I was where I belong, at the dashboard, with every switch set to the place it was born to occupy. The hotel's glass corridor ran on like a runway with no touchdown marks. I walked it, hand brushing the pocket where my keychain lived, squadron patch small as a coin and heavy as a hull bolt. Suits slid past, shoes whispering on plush carpet. A few eyes paused on me and veered away like compasses hitting interference. Beyond the panes, the city lay in a light that didn't know someone had just pulled a safety pin. My phone pulsed short, even beats. Freeze placed, a review committee seated. Press inquiry pending. I chose not to answer reporters. The fund's one-paragraph statement had gone out. We've initiated review under the Ethics Annex. We're protecting the veterans' housing timeline, and we invite the partner to submit a remedial plan. No names, no extra heat. A shield made of sentences. At the lobby desk, employees murmured. A middle-aged security guard carried himself like a man who's worn a ruck long miles. He caught my eye and gave the smallest nod. Then a text from an unknown number. Mike here, former Navy elevator maintenance. I was at the door last night. Thanks for calling it what it was. The string of words felt like a steadying hand on a shoulder between engines. I replied, "Stay safe, Mike." Nothing more. Thank yous rivet metal to clauses people assume are inert. My father-in-law's legal aid emailed for the detailed remedial plan. I attached it, bullet by bullet. Mandatory workplace training across the system, higher veteran hiring and promotion targets, an anonymous feedback channel, a public dashboard of those metrics by quarter. I picked words that couldn't be read two ways. There's always an exit, but exits charge a fare. A bank relations officer called. Calm voice, tidy list. Scheduled disbursements moving to hold. Contracted payables still honored to term. Any new changes require committee approval. Copy, I said. The brevity made her laugh. You talk like radio. Half a beat of quiet than me, muscle memory. She said, the good kind. Local news began to rumble like far thunder. Hotel group under ethics review over veteran policy. Another anchor. Veterans Housing Fund tightens clauses. I didn't sit through the analysis. I checked the site sheet. Crew still pouring slab at Lot C, steel frames staged for weld checks. Those numbers calmed me more than any headline. At the end of this, what's waiting isn't a debate. It's a roof. A young front desk clerk DM'd the fund. My mom's a former Army medic. I need a place to practice talking straight to management when something's wrong. The anonymous line was already in the plan. I added a note. Pilot first at 3 flagship hotels, train managers how to receive reports. Anonymous isn't for hiding. It lets people be brave without a sponsor. I passed a conference room. Through glass, I saw him back to me, arms folded, watching someone advance slides. A number flashed, vanished, like a bad signal. I didn't slow. Some battles don't permit the luxury of lingering on a wince. I had other work. Ship the packet to the fund's oversight team, log site progress, keep my hands from shaking with leftover adrenaline. Outside the revolving door, desert heat slapped the face. I stood a minute under the awning and watched the traffic of busy lives. Tourist broadsides pinwheeled up, settled at my shoes, and rode the wind again. Dignity's the same way. I thought, it can be stepped on and wrinkled, but if someone picks it up and smooths the fold, it's a paper with a job again. Another buzz. City liaison. Review notice received. Land incentives unchanged during suspension provided project schedule holds. I forwarded it to the fund and site leads with a line. Eyes on Lot C timeline and fire line plumbing. Leave no excuse to call us slow. The manager sent back a thumbs-up emoji, rare among our dry memos. The afternoon tilted color. Back in the lobby, the tall glass doors cycled open, shut, open, shut. Each close made a soft thup like breaking contact between radio channels. From inside, I watched the street, taxis, people, everything reflected twice, 3 times. I remembered a lesson. Don't shoot the mirror. Fix the mechanism that makes it lie. I didn't need to shatter anything. I needed the door to close at the right time and open for the right people. Reporters drifted over, booms like antennas. I smiled, handed them a printed fund statement, and stepped back. Questions rattled. Are you behind the bridge loan? Are you targeting your husband's family? Personal feud. I repeated the line we drilled. The fund speaks to standards and schedule. No comment on individuals. Nobody loves a low-salt answer, but durability lives in restraint. I stepped out and let the door slide shut at my back. This thup sounded louder, the pop of a seal on an envelope. My reflection layered over neon and dissolved as the glass met frame. That's the sound of a shift ending, I thought. You hand over, pull your name plate off the board, and walk out, leaving the system to run on the rails you just checked. A text from my husband. I read the statement. I understand. I need time. I typed back. So do I. No one wins when a household has to learn language from scratch, but speech is the first condition of respect. Before leaving, I ducked into the lobby convenience store for a bottle of water. The cashier clocked my keychain, read the patch, and smiled. My brother flew too. Hope he's safe, I said. The cold bottle in my hand felt like a metronome for pulse. Small, real things keep you from being swept. The sky went to a thin metal color. I walked the curb and let traffic be the soundtrack. In my head, I ticked the next steps. A tech call with the site team through the fund, which metrics to surface, which milestones to lock so money can resume once the remedial plan lands. Above all, I kept the rule that brought me from the flight line to here. Go quiet when you should, speak when it's enough, and let mechanisms, not ego, decide the route. When I returned, the glass door breathed open. I crossed the threshold and heard it seal behind me, clean, sure, no crack. Someday this entry will open for people who stand straight because they can say, I respect you. Until then, my post is what it's always been. The place between noise and procedure, between pride and a roof not yet finished. I touched my pocket. The patch lay steady, silver threads unfrayed. And like every shift that ends by the book, I exhaled, chin level, eyes front. I left the hotel early and took the ring road out to the edge of the city. The desert opened like a wide, blank page people were riding on with steel, concrete, and sweat. The veterans' housing site didn't have its main gate yet, just a temporary stretch of chain link and a plywood sign with the project name, black letters spiraling up into a pale sky. I pulled over on the dirt shoulder. Dust and anti-rust paint rose in a smell that sounded like an overture. At the far end, a masonry crew worked the mixer, shovels clinking in a steady rhythm. Closer in, the framing team set bolts, metal touching metal without a scream because everybody knew the beat. The site manager waved. Her name was Harper, former MP, sun-browned face, a thin line of ink on her forearm so small you had to stand close to read it. She handed me a hard hat and glanced through the fence. Loud yesterday. I nodded. She shrugged like someone who stood in louder places with fewer names. As long as the schedule runs, she said, we'll handle the rest. On the status board, Lot C was filled in green. Fire line wore a red underline. Pressure test. Short words, command voice, you look once and know the work. My husband rolled up a few minutes later, his tires kicking a little exclamation mark of dust. T-shirt, no sunglasses, eyes pinched against the light. He stood at the fence, hands in pockets, like a man practicing how to stand without leaning on anything. We didn't hug. Out here, where everything is heavy and black and yellow tape matters, people respect safe distance. I read everything, he said first, voice rough from a short night. I saw Dad too. He's learning not to yell. I looked at the half-built frames, the planks like a child's first pages of handwriting. Learning is good, I said. What about you? He gave a small, unforced, sad smile. I'm learning not to be quiet, learning to say you're right without feeling like I lost. A breeze pushed grit against our ankles. I kept it slow. This isn't winning and losing. It's the question of whether you can stand upright next to the person you love. He swallowed and nodded. I'm sorry I left you alone that night. I didn't let him fall into the apology hole. I don't need a hero in front of a crowd. I need a partner who holds the line when the line wobbles. I pointed at the site. They're building with two things, drawings and balance. So is a marriage. He followed my hand, past the lumber, stopping on a crew lifting a window frame. I want to stay, he said. Not at the hotel here. I waited. I'm going to step back from the family company, at least until they learn what they have to learn. I want to volunteer here. He searched my face. If you'll let me, I want to relearn standing straight beside you. Some answers don't belong to this minute. They belong to time and action. I'm not closing the door, I said, but I'm locking a latch. He knew what I meant. Separation. For a while, I nodded. So you can do the thing only you can do for yourself, rebuild your spine. He smiled, this time with a little sun in it. Okay. He motioned toward the site, asking permission to step into a world without his father's last name. You coming? I shook my head. Go on today. I'll watch from out here. Sometimes standing outside helps you see the straight line. Harper passed by and set her palm on the fence. We good? She asked, not nosy, just a safety check. I nodded. We're good. She paced back and shouted to the framers, north corner half turn tighter. The order made me smile. In this place, everything moves on small commands, repeated in the right spot like rivets stitching two plates together. A sight runner came over with an envelope and slid it through the gap. For you, he said. Hand delivered. Cream paper, soft script, a hint of perfume, strange on a job site. I knew my mother-in-law's hand at the first touch. I stepped into the container's shade and opened it. A few unruled pages, her letters slanted like a woman crossing plush carpet in heels. Daughter, she wrote, I don't know how to write this correctly. My whole life I've relied on cards with the right words preprinted. That night I was silent. I have been silent for years the way women are taught to keep a house smooth. I thought silence was oil. It turns out some engines shouldn't be oiled. She told me about being young and newly married, wanting to resist some hot decision and retreating behind a beautiful curtain, about my husband's father, a man the rest of the city has allowed to speak too loudly for too long. I'm sorry, her line thinned, for not speaking when I should have. I know you don't need my apology to do what's right, but I want you to know I hear the order you've given yourself, and I'm learning to hear it for me. I folded the letter. The paper warmed under my hands. Some apologies cool metal. Some loosen a screw so the wind can pass. I heard both in that ink. I slid the note into my wallet and looked through the fence. My husband was helping a carpenter hold the window frame square. His shoulders were set, not the flex of a man posing for a camera, but the lean of someone holding the weight so another can set the screw. Now and then he glanced over. I answered with a nod, the kind you give across a runway when the safe-to-go light comes on. Harper came back, wiping sweat with her sleeve. What stays after a project, she said, is everything you can't see, pipes, wire, waterproofing. I nodded. And ethics clauses, I added. She smiled and squinted into the sun. That's the real waterproofing. I reached into my pocket and took out my keychain. The squadron patch's silver threads caught a thin blade of light. I swung it once and heard the faint metal kiss I've marched to for years. "Harper," I called. She turned, surprised when I unthreaded the patch, looped it to a nylon tie. "This," I said, "was in my pocket while I learned to stand still inside noise. I held it through the fence. It belongs here now, where people are learning to build something that stands longer." She took it without ceremony, turning it toward the sun, thumb tracing the worn stitching. "It's going in the ops room," she said, voice lower than usual. "So anyone who walks in remembers who this is for." Wind freshened, hurrying a school of sand along the fence. I stood there and felt a pocket open in my chest, just enough space so breathing didn't snag. Not because everything was solved, because I'd moved to my right place in the story. Not in a ballroom, not under neon, but where people teach each other to clip into what saves you when the shake comes. After break, my husband came back out, collar dark with sweat. He stood beside me, not leaning on the fence, not reaching for my hand because habit told him to, just standing parallel. "I'm staying late," he said. "They're short for debris cleanup." I smiled. "Clearing rubble is a good way to start." He drew a long breath. "What about us?" I let each word land where it belonged. "We split households for now. I'm renting near the old base. When you're ready, don't tell me with talk. Bring a volunteer schedule. Bring your own plan." He nodded, no tears, and that relieved me. Crying's easy. Planning's hard. The sun slid toward the city's left shoulder. I returned the hard hat, peeled off gloves, tucked my notes away. Before leaving, I pressed my hand to the fence and felt the faint tremor from the drills. Anything that's rising has a frequency. Put your ear close enough and patience has a sound. I drove off to that steady metal music, thinking about perfume on paper, the way his hands held that frame, and the patch that now hung in the ops room speaking for me. My car slipped into traffic. I didn't look back. Everything I needed to see was ahead. I pictured the evening, quiet room, 2 chairs not facing each other, but set at an angle toward the same horizon. No one knows where we'll end up. I know this. I pulled a rusted screw out of my throat and replaced it with a spring that moves with my own breath. The shifts of regular life remain, and I'm ready to write my name on the board the minute the previous shift ends. A year later, I drove a road with a new name, Avenue of Homecoming. A little theatrical, sure, but right under the tires it felt right. Sapling trees braced with guy lines, pale leaves, the red dust finally less mean. The center's gate wasn't tall, just tall enough for one small sign to say what mattered. Veterans Housing and Skills Center. I cut the engine and stood a moment by the grass where kids chased a black and white ball, laughter bouncing off the brick and back like a familiar song you've only ever heard from a distance. The lobby was cool, new paint sweet blending with laminated wood into a quiet smell of peace. Admin offices to the left, skill rooms to the right, polished work tables, bright stainless ranges, tool sets hung smallest to largest. Black and white photos along the wall, tattooed forearms, duty boots, an old cap on a nail bent with rust. I stopped in the middle of the room. There, in a thin frame, was the squadron patch. They'd pressed it to gray cloth, a small card below set in clean type. "For those who return, so we remember silence has a shape and respect must be audible." I touched the glass. The chill came back up my arm like rinsing dust from your throat after a desert shift. Harper came out of the hall with a clipboard, hair twisted up, a crescent of sweat at her temple like a watermark of real work. Her eyes smiled before her mouth did. "You made it," she said. "Right on time for lunch." Out back, the BBQ was throwing a straight column of smoke that drifted and resettled. Meat and corn and sauce braided the air. Ball caps rotated on grill duty. A grandmother sliced onions through tears and grinned anyway. On a folding table, paper plates and cans of root beer sweating cold. Last year's ethics review lived now in a thin folder in the records room. Remedial plan complete, training metrics lifted from minimum to durable. Nobody wanted to recite numbers at lunch, but I knew they were there, like the water lines running underfoot. Harper tugged me toward the yard, reading the daily like a prescription. Retention rates, class counts, counseling hours. Where'd all these kids come from? I asked, watching them cling to adults like magnets. Everywhere, she said. RVs parked too long on the edge, week-to-week motels, a friend's couch. Now they've got a yard where scraped knees belong to the right age. At the far corner, I saw my husband, or the man who used to sleep next to me in a room with the hum of AC, handing out plates, joking with a curly-headed boy. Center t-shirt, sweat dark along the back, the same stance he had holding a window frame last year, unposed, ungimmicked. He spotted me and raised a hand like a wave from across a runway. I waved back. No ritual needed to define the space between us. We'd separated, then each found a path. His through days of hauling debris until it became habit, learning to write small grant requests for the skills program, trading the company wardrobe for a shirt with the project's name. Mine through a rental near the old base, morning runs along the fence line, afternoon draw-pins on the dashboard, nights fluent in a silence that counts as a language. He walked over while I studied the bulletin board. Intro electrical, basic kitchen, resume clinic, a group night for folks in recovery. You're just in time for the raffle, he said, nodding at a cardboard box. Inside, quarter-fold slips with names of graduates slated to receive their first starter toolkit. A class finishes today, he added, light as talking weather. His face carried the kind of good fatigue that comes from moving real weight, not saving face. You good? I asked. He nodded. I don't miss neon much. I miss that feeling of holding something steady so somebody else can set a screw. It quiets my head. I smiled. Quiet's a luxury, I said. Worth paying for. A grandmother slipped her hand through my elbow, no questions asked. Eat yet, honey? She parked a plate in my palm and sent me to the line like everyone else. When I reached the pans, he served me a slice of brisket, a cob of corn, and a scoop of potato salad. Sauce kissed my fingertip. I licked it off and realized I was smiling. A kid tripped, stood, dusted sand off his knee, and laughed louder. A vet told a story about Iraq. Someone countered with Alaska. Words flew like birds that never perch long. No one weighed glory. People brought time, backs, and barbecue tricks. Harper tugged me to a corner where a city map hung. Red dots marked where residents had moved on once they got steady. Farther out apartments, better weekly rentals, little houses at the edge. Sky map, she said, pointing to thin pennants of color strung between dots like tracer lines. Each ribbon's a flight path. Folks who fly out still have a tanker to come home to if they need refuel. I stood and let the map warm my chest. The lines looked like radar returns when a plane finds the right approach. In the yard, a boy tugged my husband's sleeve and pointed at the lobby frame. Uncle, what's that? He bent, eyes level with the kids, clear as water stirred. It's a patch, he said. It reminds grown-ups not to forget. The boy nodded, maybe not all the way understanding, but his hand gripped his toy truck tighter. Watching them, I understood some apologies stop being letters. They become time, sweat, and hands holding a frame while someone else drives the screw. We stood side by side as the sun slid and the shade line from the canopy drew long over grass. I'm not asking to move back, he said, eyes on the kids. Just this, when your doors open, I'll knock with a new volunteer schedule. I nodded. Don't knock with words, I said. Knock with hours. He smiled without sighing. Roger that. We fell quiet, but but it wasn't the carpeted silence anymore. It was the silence of two people posted to the same side. Before I left, I went back to the frame and looked at the patch one more time. I remembered my hand closing on it in the elevator, pointing it toward my screen the next morning, unthreading it at the fence at noon. Each time it was a door. Now it's a window onto a calmer piece of sky where neon doesn't glare. I tapped the glass once, then stepped back so someone else could step forward. Outside the gate, Avenue of Homecoming ran on like a line drawn across a sky with the cloud lanes finally showing. I rolled the window down and let the BBQ smoke circle the seats. The radio found an old country track, the singer's rough voice listing names off uniforms and the ones who came back. I didn't sing along. I drove, composing a short invitation for people who haven't been here yet. If you served, if someone you love served, or if you just believe respect is the footing of any decent city. Bring an afternoon, a box of screws, an hour of teaching, or a story about bowing your head at the right time. Small things outlast big promises. Merging onto the main road, I checked the mirror. The yard shrank, the BBQ ember a red dot in green, the patch in its frame a tiny light with no readable text. I don't need to read it anymore. I know its language by heart. If anyone asks what changed this year, I'll say, no miracles. Just people standing straight, saying what needs saying, and letting a good mechanism finish the job. Then I smiled, drummed a knuckle on the wheel, a habit from long shifts, and kept driving into the place where small roads meet and make a sky map big enough for many parallel flights.